I am 84 years old. That's not a line I ever thought I open a story with, but here we are 18 I fight in World War II. I raised 6 children in this country. And tonight, I ate my birthday cake alone. Sitting on the edge in the narrow bed in a room that smells like disinfected and all crafted, the cake was story, both vanilla, white frosting. It say happy 18 date in blue letters. Nobody corrected the number.
To notice. I didn't light the candles. I just cut myself a slice, slow and careful, like I was afraid the sound of the knife might bother someone. It didn't. There was no one to bother. You might be thinking this is one of those stories where an old man blames the world, or blames his kids, or talks about how everything went wrong somewhere out there. That's not what this is. I'm not angry at my children. I'm angry at myself. And it took me a long time to understand why. I'm talking to you because you still have time. I don't know your age. You could be 55, 60, maybe younger, old enough to feel tired in your bones, but young enough to believe you've still got later ahead of you. I believed in later my whole life. I leaned on it like a crutch. Turns out, later has a bad habit of quietly turning into never. Right now, I'm lying in a veteran's home outside Detroit. Michigan winters bite hard out here. The kind of cold that creeps into your joints and reminds you of every mile you ever walked in boots that didn't fit quite right. The hallway outside my room hums at night. Wheels squeak. A television murmurs somewhere down the corridor. Always on. Always too loud or too quiet. Most of the men here sleep with their doors open. Some are afraid of dying alone. Some are just afraid of silence. This morning, before the cake, I sat in a plastic chair by the window and watched the parking lot. Snow had piled up along the curb. A nurse walked past with a clipboard. I nodded. She smiled the kind of smile people practice. Polite, kind, temporary. That's when it hit me sharp and clean. I had built a life where everything important could be replaced. The job, the hours, even me. People like to say families drift apart. They say kids grow up and forget. That's a comforting story. It lets you sleep at night. The truth is uglier. I taught my children how to live without me long before they ever did. I didn't mean to. God knows I didn't mean to. When I came home from the war, I swore I'd be different from my father. He was a hard man, worked himself raw, kept his feelings locked up tight. He put food on the table and thought that was the same thing as love. I told myself I wouldn't do that. I told myself I'd be present. I told myself a lot of things. But I also told myself a man's job was simple. Work, provide, protect. Feelings were something you handled quietly, if at all. You didn't talk about them. He showed up, did the job, paid the bills. I believed that with the same certainty, I believed the sun would rise. And for a while, it seemed like I was right. We had a house. Kids filled every room. Noise, laughter, arguments over nothing. I was tired all the time, but I was proud. I thought pride was the same thing as being needed. Here's the part that still sits heavy in my chest. I had choices, small ones, everyday ones. Stay late at the shop or come home for dinner. Fix one more car or sit through school play. Say, I'll make it up to you, or just sit down and listen. None of those choices felt big at the time. They felt practical, responsible, necessary. I never chose to walk away from my family. I chose work, again and again. I chose it because it felt safe, because it made sense, because it was something I knew how to be good at. Now at 84, lying in this narrow bed with a paper napkin folded beside a half-eaten cake, I'm faced with a choice of a different kind. I can tell myself this is just how life goes, or I can finally tell the truth. The truth is I wasn't absent because I was busy. I was absent because I didn't know how to be close. And instead of learning, I hid behind what looked like responsibility. On the small table next to me, there's an old black and white photograph. A young soldier in uniform. A woman in a summer dress. A baby held awkwardly, like something precious and terrifying all at once. I look at that man sometimes, and I want to warn him. I want to grab him by the collar and say, don't confuse being needed with being known. But he wouldn't listen. I wouldn't have listened. So I'm telling you instead, because this story isn't about the war I fought overseas. It's about the war I carried home, and how without ever raising my voice, I slowly lost the people I loved most. If you're still watching, it means some part of you recognizes that road. And if you're willing to keep listening, I'll tell you how a full house turned into this quiet room. Not all at once, not dramatically, but one ordinary choice at a time. The first night my oldest boy came home screaming, I didn't know what to do with my hands. That's the truth. Not something you hear men admit. He was barely a week old, red face, tight fists, crying like the world had already disappointed him. Margaret was exhausted, eyes hollow, sitting on the edge of the bed like she might tip over if she moved wrong. I'd just gotten back from the garage, still smelling like oil and cold air. I stood there useless, a grown man, a soldier, and I froze. Margaret finally snapped, not angry, just done. She put him in my arms and said, "Take him. I need 5 minutes." That was it. No instructions, no reassurance, just a handoff. I held him the way you hold something fragile you don't quite trust yourself with. Too tight, then too loose. He kept crying, louder. My chest started to tighten. Not because of him, because the sound dragged something out of me I didn't have words for. So I did the only thing that came to mind. I started humming an old army tune, something I'd heard enough times it lived in my bones. I didn't even realize what I was doing until his crying slowed, then stopped. He fell asleep on my chest. I remember thinking, that's it. I can do this. I don't have to talk. I don't have to explain myself. I just have to show up. That belief carried me a long way. Too long. After the war, Ohio felt small. Not bad. Just tight. Like a coat you'd outgrown but kept wearing because it was familiar. Jobs were better up near Detroit. So we packed what we had and drove north. Margaret was pregnant again by then. Second kid on the way. We rented a little place with thin walls and furniture that didn't match. Didn't matter. It was ours. I told myself we were building something solid. Something my own father never gave me. I worked days at a plant and nights fixing cars in a neighbor's garage. Word got around. I was good with engines. Quiet. Reliable. Men trusted that. Margaret trusted me too, at first. When I missed dinner, she'd save a plate. When I missed bedtime, she'd say, "He asked for you." I'd nod, kiss her cheek, promise myself tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow is a dangerous word. Years passed the way they do when you're busy. One child turned into 3, then 4, then 6. Boys and girls. Shoes by the door. Noise everywhere. I opened my own shop. Small but mine. A couple of lifts. Hand-painted sign. I'd unlock it before sunrise and lock it long after dark. Every night I came home tired and proud. Proud is a tricky feeling. It can drown out a lot of other signals. There were moments, little ones. I see them clearer now than I did then. My oldest daughter on a school stage, scanning the crowd. A teacher asking if I was coming to the conference. A boy standing in the garage doorway, watching me work, waiting for permission to speak. I'd say things like, "Not now," or "I'll make it up to you," and mean it. I really did. I just didn't realize how often later sounded like never to child. Margaret tried. She tried more than once. Late at night when the house was quiet, she'd sit at the table and say, "Ed, they need you. Not your money. Not the business. You." I'd feel cornered, defensive. I wasn't cruel, but I was sharp. "You think these bills pay themselves?" I'd say. Then I'd head back out to the garage, like the argument was settled. Here's the part one didn't understand back then. I wasn't choosing work because I loved it more than my family. I was choosing it because it asked less of me. Engines don't need reassurance. Wrenches don't ask how you're feeling. Work was clean, predictable. If you did it right, it responded. Kids don't work that way. There was a night with my son Tom that still gets to me. He was maybe 15. Came home quiet. Too quiet. Turns out he'd been cut from a school team. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't try. I handed him a wrench instead. We worked on an old pickup until our hands were black and our shoulders ached. I thought that was bonding. Maybe part of it was, but I never asked him how it felt. Never told him it was okay to fail. I taught him how to fix things. I didn't teach him how to be held when something broke inside. I see the pattern now. Back then, I saw a man doing his best. Dinner tables came and went. Birthdays, holidays. I was there enough to feel justified. Gone enough for it to matter. The kids grew older, louder, then quieter. One by one, they stopped waiting for me to come home. There's a photograph I keep thinking about. All of us in the 70s, crowded around a table, laughing. Someone caught the moment just before I stood up to head back to the shop. You can see it in my posture. Half present. Already leaving. That was the choice whether I knew it or not. Stay at the table or go finish one more job. I told myself the work was fun. I never asked if what they wanted was me. By the time I realized something was slipping, it already had. And the worst part is this. Nothing felt wrong enough to stop. No single fight. No big explosion. Just years of choosing the thing that made sense over the thing that made connection. If you're listening and thinking, that sounds familiar, I won't tell you what to do. I didn't listen when people told me either. I'll just say this. The man I was thought he had endless chances to show up later. The man I am knows that every quiet decision adds up. In the next part, I'll tell you what happens when the house empties, the work slows down, and there's nowhere left to hide from the sound of your own thoughts. The first time I realized my children were afraid of disappointing me, not because I'd yell, but because I wouldn't listen, was at my daughter Lisa's wedding. That's not how it felt in the moment. In the moment, I felt disrespected, pushed aside, like a man who'd paid every bill and still didn't get a say. I stood there in a rented suit that didn't quite fit right, watching people bustle around. And I remember thinking, I don't belong in this picture. I didn't know yet that the reason I felt that way was because I'd trained them to live without me in it. Lisa pulled me aside during the rehearsal, not angrily, calm. That calm you use when you've already had the argument 100 times in your head. She said, Dad, you can't just show up for one day and act like you were there all those years. Her voice didn't shake. That's what hurt the most. She wasn't trying to wound me. She was stating a fact. I did what I always did. I defended the work. I said, you kids never went hungry. You had a roof. You went to college. I heard my own voice firm and practiced, like a speech I'd been rehearsing my whole life. She nodded. Then she said, I know, and I'm grateful. But that's not the same thing. There was no argument left after that. Just space. That space started showing up everywhere once the kids were grown. Holidays felt formal. Conversations stayed shallow. I'd ask about jobs, houses, weather. They'd answer politely. Nobody lingered. Nobody leaned in. I told myself this was normal. Kids grow up. Lives move on. That story let me keep my footing. Margaret saw it before I did. She always did. By the time the shop was running itself, my hands didn't ache the way they used to. She started asking me to slow down, sit with her, take walks, come to bed earlier. I nodded, promised. Then I'd find something else that needed fixing. When she got sick, I doubled down on what I knew. I worked more, told myself I was being responsible. Hospital bills don't pay themselves. I'd visit her stand by the bed, talk about logistics, appointments, insurance, things that felt useful. She'd look at me, tired but patient, like she was waiting for something I couldn't name. One afternoon, in a hospital hallway that smelled like coffee and cleaning solution, my son Tom stopped me. He was grown by then, taller than me, calm in a way I wasn't. He said, Dad, she doesn't need you to fix this. She needs you to sit in the chair and hold her hand. That was it. No anger, just truth. I nodded. I even said, I know. Then I went back to work the next day. That's the choice I keep coming back to. Not the war, not the business. That hallway. I could have turned around. I could have gone back into that room and done the one thing I'd avoided my whole life. Instead, I chose what felt safe. Again, after Margaret passed, the house felt too big and too quiet. Her chair by the window stayed empty. Her things slowly disappeared into boxes. The kids came by, helped organize, talked about arrangements. They were kind, efficient. They treated me like someone fragile, someone they didn't quite know how to talk to. Years later, after I finally sold the shop and moved out of the house, I found myself alone with time. Real time, long afternoons, quiet evenings, the kind of silence you can't escape by staying busy. I'd sit in the living room with the television on and the sound turned down, flipping through an old phone book with my kids' names written in the margins. I'd pick up the phone, set it back down, tell myself I didn't want to bother them. That was the lie I told to protect what little pride I'd left. Now I'm here in this veteran's home, watching men stare at walls and talk to photos. Some of them blame their kids. Some blame the world. I don't blame anyone. I know exactly how this happened. It didn't happen in one big moment. It happened in thousands of small ones. When I chose to be useful instead of present. There's a choice in front of me even now. I can sit with this understanding and let it harden into regret. Or I can do something I've never been good at. I can risk saying what I should have said years ago, knowing it might not change anything. In the next part, I'll tell you what it looks like when an old man finally tries to speak plainly, without tools in his hands or work to hide behind, and what it costs to do that this late in life. The woman asked me a simple question, and I didn't know how to answer it. She was young, maybe in her 20s, hair pulled back, notebook tucked under her arm. She came into the veterans' home one afternoon with a small group, smiling the way young people do when they're trying to be respectful around old men they don't yet understand. They were collecting stories for some local archive, war memories, service records, things like that. She sat across from me, clicked her pen, and said, "Mr. Collins, what's the one thing you're most proud of?" The answer came out automatically. Medals, the shop, keeping food on the table. 6 kids who never went hungry. I heard myself listing accomplishments like items on an invoice. She nodded and wrote them down. Then she looked up and waited. That's when I realized she wasn't done. I went quiet. The room felt smaller. For the first time in a long while, I couldn't reach for work or routine to fill the space. There was nothing else on that list. Nothing I could say without lying. I finally said, "I don't think I was proud of the right things." She didn't interrupt, didn't correct me, just waited. I told her I'd spent most of my life confusing duty with closeness, that I thought being necessary was the same thing as being loved. I didn't dress it up. I didn't blame anyone. I just said it the way it came out. Rough, uneven, honest. When I finished, she closed her notebook and said something that stayed with me. If you can't say it to them, sometimes you can write it. Letters go places our voices never learned how to reach. I nodded, thanked her, thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. That night, after dinner trays were cleared and the hallway settled into its usual hum, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the small desk by the wall. A pen lay there, paper too. I hadn't written a letter in decades. Bills, sure. Notes, numbers, but not letters. Here was the choice. Put the pen down and let the thought pass, the way I'd always done. Or try something new, knowing it might fail. Knowing it might open doors I didn't know how to walk through. I picked up the pen. The first letter took an hour to write and another hour to tear up. Too stiff, too defensive, too much explaining. I kept wanting to justify myself. That was the old habit. I had to fight it. The second letter was shorter. So was the third. By the fourth, my hand hurt and my eyes burned. But the words finally sounded like they belonged to me. I didn't offer advice. Didn't ask for forgiveness outright. I just told the truth. That I thought putting food on the table was enough. That it wasn't. That I'd been wrong about what makes a good father. That I've been afraid of saying, "I love you" out loud because I didn't trust my own voice with it. I wrote 6 letters, one for each child. No copies, no shortcuts, each one different, each one harder than the last. When I was done, I sat there with them spread across the desk like parts laid out for repair I didn't know how to finish. For a moment, I almost put them back in the drawer. Some habits die hard. But the next morning, I asked the volunteer if she could help me mail them. She smiled like she knew exactly how much that cost me. Then I waited. Waiting is a strange thing when you spend a lifetime staying busy. Days stretch. Silence gets louder. I told myself not to expect anything. Told myself this was about saying the words, not hearing them back. A week passed. Then 2. On the 17th day, the nurse knocked and said I had a visitor. It was my daughter Mary. She stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside yet. Same eyes as her mother. Same careful posture. I didn't stand up right away. Didn't trust my legs. We said hello. Just that. Hello. She sat. I apologized for the room. She waved it off. There was a pause, thick and awkward, the kind you can't rush. Finally, I said, "I don't know how to do this." She nodded. "Me neither," she said. "Maybe we just start by sitting here." So we did. We talked about small things at first. The drive, the weather, the letter. She didn't praise it, didn't tear it apart. She just said, "I didn't know you felt that way." That was enough. Before she left, she set a small card on the table. No jokes, no numbers, just "Love your daughter Mary." I watched her hand as she did it. Watched my own hand cover hers for a moment longer than necessary. When the door closed, I didn't feel fixed. I didn't feel redeemed. I felt something quieter. Something like having finally set down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. There are still letters unanswered. There are still things that may never be repaired. I know that now. But for the first time in a long time, I chose the harder path instead of the familiar one. In the next part, I'll tell you what it's like to live with that choice. Not as a miracle, not as a happy ending, but as an old man who finally learned what mattered, even if he learned it late. The phone didn't ring. It buzzed. That's what life turns into when you get old. Fewer ringing phones, more little vibrations you have to squint at, like the world is whispering instead of speaking. It was after dinner, the hour when the hallway quiets down and the men here either fall asleep in front of the television or stare at the ceiling and pretend they're thinking about something else. My hand was on the nightstand when the buzz came. I saw Mary's name on the screen the nurse had helped me set up. For a second, my chest tightened the way it used to before I walked into a hard conversation. I didn't answer right away. Here was the choice again. Pick up and risk hearing something I wasn't ready for. Or let it go to voicemail and keep my pride intact. Pride is a stubborn thing. It survives wars, layoffs, funerals. It can survive love, too, if you let it. I answered. Dad, Mary said, and there was a small pause, like she was making sure I was really there. I'm on my break. I've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's what my life had trained my children to offer me. A quick slot between errands and work, like I was an appointment. And I couldn't blame her. Not anymore. So I told her the truth. I'm glad you called, I said. I was sitting here, listening to the radiator click. Thought I'd hear that all night. She laughed a little. Not a big laugh. A tired one. It's snowing here, she said. Real snow. The kind Mom used to love. When she said Mom, my throat tightened. For years, I avoided that word because it carried too much. Now it felt like a door I'd finally stopped locking. We talked. Small things. Her drive home from work. My dinner tray. The volunteer with the notebook who kept showing up every Thursday like she was punching clock. Mary told me my letter was on her kitchen counter. Folded and unfolded so many times the paper had gone soft. Then she said, Tom got his. I didn't breathe for a second. Tom was the one I worried about most. The one who'd looked me in the eye in that hospital hallway and told me what Margaret needed. The one I'd failed in the cleanest, quietest way. What did he say? I asked. Mary hesitated. He didn't say much. He texted me. He said, I don't know what to do with this. That sentence hit me harder than any insult could have. Because it sounded like me. It sounded like the boy with a wrench in his hand, learning that feelings were a problem you fix by staying busy. After the call, I sat there with the screen dark in my lap, staring at my own reflection. An old man's face, thin skin, eyes that had seen too much and said too little. I thought about calling Tom myself. I even found his number. My thumb hovered over it. And then the old fear showed up. What if he doesn't answer? What if he answers, and I ruin it with the wrong words? What if my voice shakes and I sound weak? That fear used to send me back to the shop. Now it sent me nowhere. There was nowhere left to run. So I pressed call. It rang twice, then went quiet. I thought it had gone to voicemail, and my stomach dropped. But then I heard his voice. Older now, deeper. Still my son. Dad. I swallowed. Tom, it's me. I know, he said. And I could hear the caution in it. Not anger. Caution. Like he was stepping onto ice. I didn't launch into a speech. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I did the one thing I'd avoided for 84 years. I'm sorry, I said. Not the kind of sorry that asks you to make me feel better. Just sorry. I should have been there. I should have known you. I didn't. There was a long silence. Not dramatic. Just real. The kind where you can hear a house settling. Finally, he said, I read the letter 3 times. Yeah. I wanted to be mad, he said. But mostly I don't know. It's weird hearing you talk like a person. That was a punch and a gift at the same time. I let it land. I was a person, I said. I just hit it. I thought that's what men did. He let out a breath. Mom used to say you were scared. I almost argued, almost corrected him. Then I caught myself. Another choice. Old habits or new truth. She was right, I said. We didn't fix everything in that call. We didn't even come close. We talked for 8 minutes, maybe 10, about nothing important and everything important. He asked how my knees were. I asked about his kids. He told me his oldest had started working on cars. I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Pride that wasn't lonely. When we hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from weakness, from stepping into a room I'd avoided my whole life. Now, I'm not going to sell you a happy ending. 3 of my kids still haven't responded to the letters. One of them might never. I don't get to rewrite the years. I don't get to walk back into a school auditorium and sit in the front row. I don't get to hold Margaret's hand in that hospital room. Those chances are gone. What I do get, if I'm honest, is this: a clear look at what happened, and one last chance to say it out loud without blaming anyone else. Don't confuse being needed with being known. I was needed for a paycheck, for a ride to the airport, for a piece of advice about a leaking faucet. I was rarely known because I never let anyone close enough to know me. I call that strength. It was just distance wearing a uniform. If you're watching this and you've got kids in the next room, or a father who's getting quieter every year, here's the only thing I can tell you without preaching. Sit down. Not later. Not after one more job. Sit down while it still feels normal. Because metals rust. Businesses get sold. Houses change owners. The thing that lasts, if you're lucky, is the way someone remembers you at a table. Leaning in, listening like they matter. It's late for me. But tonight, when the radiator clicks and the hallway goes quiet, I won't be staring at the ceiling wondering if my children remember what my voice sounds like. Tonight, I know at least one of them does.